Regular viewers will recognise that this is my small barn in the paddock, the roof of which I refurbished this time last year with the help of Keith, where we worked hard all day. Okay, maybe not all day. And then I put this front on just to enclose everything. And the problem is now, I never really 100% finished the job. And there's two things outstanding. The first of which is this hole at the top between the metal corrugated wall and the new roof, which really doesn't make it that secure. So I really want to block that in. And I know when I block that in, this is going to become very dark. So the second job is to put some lighting in here so I can actually see what I'm doing. I'm really lucky to have this space, and since I refurbished the roof with Keith a year ago, it's really kept the weather out, and then putting the front wall on means that I can lock things in here, and that's why I keep my new ride-on lawnmower and all the other lawnmowers on my whacker plate and everything else that shouldn't really be in the workshop. But I know it's not going to be long before autumn and winter is here, so I'm really keen to get this gap filled that is around 12-14 inches high at the top of this wall, and to put some lighting in here, because even during the day, once I fill all these gaps, it gets really dark, and with winter coming up, I really could do with just a flick of a switch, and it's going to make this so much more usable, especially through the winter, if I can see what I'm doing. And lastly, I just need a general tidy up as well. So with that in mind, I think the first thing I need to do is install the lighting, because I know that as soon as I fill that gap, it's going to get really dark in here. So I might as well do the lighting first, which will help me when it gets dark. And then I can rearrange all my equipment here to make it more useful. So I think the first thing I need to do is to take all this rubbish and put it out there. I think whatever size workshop, garage or shed you have, it's great to have a second or even a third to store all the stuff that you don't need to use every day, but you want to have locked up and out of the weather. I have a fair amount of garden equipment now to keep the garden and my half acre of paddock tidy, so this space is excellent to keep everything in. I'm not sure though if I really need all of this or whether I've just expanded into the area. Anyway, it's pretty much full now of very, very important stuff. The lights I'm going to be using today are these, which are 45 watt, 5 foot long LED strip lights. They're IP65 rated. And they're just like the modern equivalent of a fluorescent tube. I'm going to be using 4 of them, and I'm going to put them on the beams that I put up with Keith, and that's really at quarter point. So I'm going to put them on the first beam and the third beam. Now if that doesn't prove to be light enough, then I could also put another 2 on the middle beam, but I'm just going to install them and see how I go. The other thing that's really quite handy is recently I bought this one-man aluminium scaffolding access tower. This is a 7-metre high one, although it's 7 metres tall. It does get a bit wibbly wobbly and a bit scary. Now, if I was just going to be putting one of these up, I'd just use a step ladder. But because I've got 4, plus all the metal work along here, I think it's going to be worth my while setting up a tower with a very low platform, just something easy that I can work off. Because that way, I think it's just going to make everything a lot easier. This is a very budget, lightweight tower that gets me up to the gutter on the house and just about everywhere else around the house if I need to. However, it's not the type of access tower that I would buy if I was using it every day in a professional environment. It doesn't come with the quick click connectors that most of the more expensive towers come with. And it's about as lightweight as you can make one without it collapsing. But if you just need it for a few times a year, it's absolutely perfect. It comes with 2 platforms as well as handrails, and for this type of work where you're just a couple of foot off the ground, it's a great tool to have available. It doesn't take long to put together, but initially I fixed the platform too high. It's easy to adjust just by unlocking it and moving it to the next rung down about a foot lower. These LED lights I'm fitting just have two simple clips that are screwed into whatever you're fitting it on, which the light then clips into, and compared to the old fluorescent light fittings, these are super light and really easy to fit on your own. That's the first two lights up, and I've arranged them so the cables both point at each other and come into the middle here, where I can join them together in a junction box connected to this beam. And compared to the front door where I come in, this is the back side of the beam, so I can't actually see anything generally on here. The junction box I'm going to be using is a waterproof junction box by Snyder that's got some quite nice rubbery grommets where the cables go through and don't let the water through into it. And I'm going to be using these Wago connectors inside the junction box to connect these two cables together and onto a third, which I'll run along this beam, then to the next set of lights, and then eventually that will go down to the power source. These particular boxes I bought from Screwfix, but I'm sure there's lots of equivalent versions about. By opening a small hole with a screwdriver in the rubber grommet, the cables can then push through and they make a really tight waterproof fit. With the wires in place, I can cut them to length and then prepare them for the connections. The cable I'm using today is 1.5mm squared flex for two reasons. Firstly, I have plenty of it. And secondly, I intend to terminate it with a plug, so twin and earth isn't so convenient if you're going to use a plug on the end. I'm also using Wago connectors to join the live and neutral of the lights and the incoming power cable together. This all ends up conveniently being pushed into the waterproof box. With everything now fixed, I can add some cable clips to keep the wires in place. The power cable I fit along the side timber of the roof before moving on to fix the last two lights in exactly the same way as the first. So that's all the lights installed and all the cabling done, and it all comes down to a 13 amp plug, because although I might wire this in properly in the future, I have no power here at the moment. So I'm actually using my small EcoFlow camping battery thingy. So let's see if it works, shall I? Oh. Didn't think it was going to come on for a second there. Actually, that is really quite nice. That is plenty of light, to be honest with you. I was thinking about maybe having to put another one along this middle bit here, but actually that's really quite nice. So if you're thinking about putting light in a workshop or a garage, this is about the size of a double garage, maybe just a little bit smaller. 4 of these 45 watt tubes actually give you quite a nice light. No, I'm really pleased with that. In fact, even if I close the door, that is giving quite a nice light. It's pretty even and balanced, and even at ground level it's looking pretty good, and not many shadows either. I am really happy about that. Is a good job done. Let me just show you the wiring. So both of these lights are wired together in this junction box, together with this third cable, which is the incoming power supply that I brought along the side here, that goes to another junction box. And all that is another split to these two lights here. So from here, the power is coming from this cable down here, and I've just clamped it to this point and given myself plenty of spare, because I don't really know where this is going to be situated, and maybe in the future that's just going to get wired in properly. So really happy with that, and now I've got some light, I can start blocking in this gap. So before I even think about putting any of this corrugated sheeting up, I need to think about some supports, and it's all a little bit dodgy around the back here, and it's obviously been here a long time. So I've got a central support there, which maybe I can add to going up. I've got one at the end there, not sure if it lines up properly, but I think I'm going to have to work with what I've got, and I think here I can just tie into the timber that's there. Maybe a couple of supports in the middle just to strengthen it, I don't know. I'll put the first ones in and see how they look. If you're tying into an old existing structure like this, then there's no rules. I think you just need to do whatever you can to make the new cladding as strong as possible without going too overboard. So I fix a couple of 4x2 offcuts to the existing structure with 4-inch and 6-inch screws that I think will be more than enough to hold everything together. I already have some old corrugated galvanised sheeting that I salvaged when I took down another structure that was falling down this time last year, which I'm going to use for this, although every sheet tends to be rusty at the ends, so I trim these off back to good metal. This DeWalt grinder that I bought many months ago and did a video review for, I've used so much and is a great tool to have available, and I would recommend it to anyone thinking in investing in one. It has plenty of power and it does exactly what you expect it to. If you're interested, I'll put a link to it in the description below. You know, there's something about DIY which is never quite as straightforward as you think it's going to be. You see, I'm now ready to put up my sheeting, and I don't know if you can see, but the roof that I put in last year with Keith is absolutely level. I know it's level because that's how we put it in, but the corrugated sheeting underneath is actually on a few degrees tilt. So this gap is smaller at this end than it is at this end, so it's like a tapered gap. Now the question is, do I follow with my new sheeting the roof, which I know is right, or the sheeting, which I know actually is wrong? Now normally around the house the answer is two wrongs don't make a right. You normally put it in correct and whatever happens happens. The problem is, if I put my sheeting in to the correct horizontal roof line, then because it's corrugated, it's not going to be exactly in line with the corrugated sheet underneath. So as it twists a few degrees, it's now going to step out, which I don't want it to. I want it to be nice and in those grooves all the way through. So in this case, I think I'm going to have to follow the corrugated sheeting that's in there and is actually in the wrong place, which means I'm going to have to put my sheeting up and essentially scribe it along the roof. But that's not that easy either, because you can't just scribe and move it into place like you can timber, because it's actually sitting in the corrugations. So you can scribe and cut it, but every time you move it, the move is like a couple of inches where it jumps from one corrugation to the other. I told you, nothing in DIY is that straightforward. I temporarily fix the sheet lower than its final position so I can measure and work out exactly how much I need to cut off, bearing in mind that each full corrugation is 75mm. Then I can mark this on the corrugated sheet with a chalk line, which I cut along. You could use a board for this, but this sheet here is just under 3 meters and I just don't have a board that long. I'm taking off 5mm at one end, going up to 25mm the other. with a couple of other cutouts at the end just to get around the existing beams. The sheet thankfully fits first time. I fix it with self-tapping screws, the same ones I used on the roof a year ago, and then do exactly the same to the second sheet to cover the left-hand side. So there you go, gap is all filled, the lights are in. I've started bringing all my equipment back in here, but I think I'm gonna have to wait for another day to sort it out and get it really exactly where I want it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Remember, subscribe, bell notification, Patreon, all of that sort of stuff, and I will see you next time.